Courtroom 7 held its breath that morning. Not silence. Courtrooms are never truly silent. There are shuffling papers, whispered consultations, the soft percussion of shoes on polished floors. But underneath all of that, something else. The specific tension of a room full of people who have arrived to watch something happen to someone else's life and are not entirely sure they are ready for what they are about to see. Sunlight cut through 4 tall arched windows and fell across. The floor in long gold strips, warm, indifferent. The gallery was half full and filling, journalists, court regulars. 3 people who had wandered in from the corridor and stayed because the atmosphere told them something worth staying for was about to begin. At the defense table, a woman sat alone. Not nervous alone, not abandoned alone. The kind of alone that belongs to someone who has made a decision before walking through the door and is simply living inside it now. Her name was Adaeze Okafor, 38 years old. Cream blazer, silk blouse, minimal gold studs, natural hair in a clean updo, hands folded on the table, face giving away nothing, and around her neck resting just below her collarbone a thin gold chain, and at the end of it a small compass pendant. She had worn every single day for 15 years. Her husband of 11 years was sitting across that same room preparing to ask a federal judge to take her children, and Adaeze was waiting for him to try. Emeka Okafor entered at 9:04 a.m., and he entered it like a man who had already written his victory speech. Charcoal suit pressed to a sharp crease. Silk tie burgundy chosen deliberately. Shoes that clicked against the floor at exactly 1 degree too deliberate to be unconscious. He had thought about that walk. He would never admit it. He sat. He opened his briefcase. He exchanged a quiet, confident word with Barrister Uche Obi. Expensive, experienced, worth every naira. He did not look at the defense table. Not once. That deliberate avoidance was itself a message. I have already decided you are not relevant to what happens here today. One row behind him in the gallery sat Zara Essien, 31 years old, navy dress, polished blowout, straight-backed. She had positioned herself exactly where Emeka could glance back and find her easily. She looked at Adaze once for 2 full seconds, searching for the crack, the place where the other person has started to come apart. She found nothing. She looked away first. She would spend the rest of the morning wishing she had looked away sooner. What nobody at that table understood, what would take them approximately 2 hours to begin to understand, was that the woman at the defense table had not come here to survive this morning. She had come here to end it. Judge Emmanuel Bankole had spent 29 years on the federal bench. In that time, he had watched divorce proceedings, custody battles, fraud cases, and the full range of human desperation dress itself in formal language and stand before him asking for justice. He had learned early that justice and truth were not always the same thing, and that his job was to find the narrow corridor where the two overlapped and stand inside it without flinching. He settled into his chair with the deliberateness of a man who understood that his entrance set the tone for everything that followed. He opened the case file. He read the names on the petition. He looked at the plaintiff's table. He looked at the defense table. And for exactly 1 second longer than any protocol required, he looked at Adaze Okafor, specifically at the name printed on the label of her counsel's folder. Something moved across his face. Not recognition. Not yet. Just the faint sensation of a door somewhere ahead of him, not yet visible, beginning to open. He adjusted his reading glasses and said, "Let's proceed." He had no idea that the case in front of him was about to become one he would discuss for the rest of his career. Barrister Uche Obi moved to the podium with the smooth assurance of a man who had done this hundreds of times and knew exactly how long he had before a judge's attention began to wander. He built credibility in the first 30 seconds the way experienced trial lawyers do. Steady eye contact, measured pace. Words, chosen not to impress, but to land. Then he began reading the petition. Emotional instability described vaguely as behavioral volatility. Financial dependence, the respondent holding no independent income for over 3 years, fully reliant on the plaintiff. An inability to provide a stable and nurturing home environment. And the request at the center of it all, primary custody, of Emeka Okafor, age 9, and Chisom Okafor, age 7, transferred immediately and exclusively to the father. Limited supervised visitation for the mother. As each line was read, the gallery shifted. Someone coughed. A journalist leaned forward. Adaze's attorney Nkechi Adeyemi, 43, 17 years in family and corporate litigation, placed one hand briefly on Adaze's forearm. 2 seconds. A signal. Not yet. Adaze exhaled through her nose once. She picked up her pen. She wrote a single word on her notepad, turned it face down. Then she folded her hands again and the compass pendant rested still against her chest and she waited. Emeka Okafor was a practiced man. He had built his professional identity on the ability to appear reasonable, calm and credible in difficult conversations. The kind of man who never raises his voice because he has never needed to. He took the witness stand with confidence. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at the judge with the openness of a man who has nothing to hide, which was a performance so well rehearsed it had stopped feeling like one. He talked about the children's school performance. Tabena's grades slipping. Chisholm asking twice a week why no one was there to pick her up. He described evenings when Adaze had not been home. Moods he called erratic, a withdrawal from their social life. Absences that he described as frequent and unexplained. He chose every word carefully. 3 prep sessions with his attorney. 2 evenings with coaching notes. He knew which phrases landed in a courtroom and which ones could be pulled apart on cross. What made it effective, what made it genuinely dangerous, was that it was not entirely false. Adaze had been distant. She had worked late. She had been unreachable on some of those evenings. Every lie that survives cross-examination is built on a foundation of something true. Emeka knew this. What he did not know, what he had never once considered, was that the woman sitting at the defense table had spent 14 years becoming something he had never thought to look at closely. Then Emeka said it, clearly, without hesitation, without a single flicker of doubt. My wife has no independent source of income. She has not held any form of employment in over 3 years. She is entirely financially dependent on me, and has been since the 2nd year of our marriage. He held his posture, steady, the expression of a man describing something factual. A supporting document slid across the table toward the clerk. Nkechi Adeyemi's pen did not move. She looked at the document. She looked at her own notepad. She looked at Adaze. Then she wrote 3 words on her legal pad and angled it so Adaze could read them. Adaze read them. She gave the faintest nod. Not now. Not yet. Across the room, Barrister Obi allowed himself a private, professional smile. The smile of a man who believes the most important thing has just been established. He was right that it was important. He was completely wrong about what it had just established, because in 11 years of marriage, Emeka Okafor had never once asked to sit in on the meetings that mattered. He had never opened the folder with her actual name on it. He had looked at his wife every single day for 11 years and seen exactly what he expected to see, because that was all he had ever looked for. To understand what Adaze was made of, you had to go back to the beginning. You had to go back to a modest office in Lagos. A tall, unhurried man named Chief Emeka Ose, Adayeze's father, sitting behind a desk covered in property documents and legal briefs. Not a flashy man, not a loud man, the kind of man who built things in complete silence and never once announced the weight of what he was carrying. He had started Okafor Eshin Legal Holdings with 2 partners and 1 conviction, that the best legal empire in Africa would be built not through noise, but through patience, through contracts that were tighter than anyone else's, through clients who came back because they trusted him completely, through decisions that looked small at the time and proved enormous 10 years later. Adaze grew up watching him think. At the dinner table, on the drive to school, on the back porch in the evenings when the city had gone quiet. He had one habit she noticed more than any other. Whenever a difficult decision was in front of him, he would reach into his shirt pocket and take out a small compass, hold it in his palm, look at it for a moment, then put it back. He never explained. It is she never asked. The morning she left for university, he stood at the door in his good shirt and held out a small jewelry box. Inside it was a thin gold chain, and at the end of it, a small compass pendant. He put it around her neck himself, fingers steady. Then he stepped back and looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. He said, "This is not jewelry, Adaze. This is a reminder. A compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you where you are so you can never be lost. No matter what room they put you in, no matter what they say about you, you will always know exactly where you stand. She had worn it every day since, through university, through her career, through the day she met Emeka, through the wedding, through 11 years of a marriage that had slowly become something she did not recognize. The compass had never left her neck, not once. 3 months before this courtroom morning, Chief Adaze had called Adaeze on a Tuesday evening. His voice was the same as it had always been. Quiet, precise, chosen. He told her he was restructuring the ownership documents of Okafor legal holdings. He told her he was transferring his majority stake, 61.4%, directly into her name. He told her it was not a gift, it was a correction. You built as much of this as I did, he said. The paperwork just didn't say so yet. She asked him if he was all right. He said he was fine. He said, "You've always known where you stand, baby girl. Now the documents agree." 2 weeks later, Chief Adaze passed away quietly at home. Adaeze had kept his secret and her own for every day since, until today. Adaze walked to the witness stand the way some people walk into a room they have chosen, with awareness and purpose. She had spent 8 months being told by Emeka that she was smarter than most people realized, that the future he was building had space in it for her, that the woman in his house was temporary. She had believed him with the specific conviction of someone who has confused proximity to power with possessing it. She testified that Emeka was a dedicated father. She said she had personally witnessed the children asking for him on evenings, when the house was empty, implying carefully that it was Adaze's absence creating the emptiness. She spoke about stability, structure, the home she and Emeka intended to provide. She smiled at the judge twice. She was good. She had rehearsed. And she had no idea that every word she said was being measured against documents that had been sitting in Nkechi Adeyeme's files for 4 months. She looked at Adaze exactly once. 2 seconds. What crossed her face in that moment was something she could not fully control. Not hatred, something more specific. The expression of a woman who has decided that another woman does not deserve what she has and has just taken action on that decision in a federal court. She looked away first, and she would spend the rest of the morning wishing she had never taken that stand. Barrister Obi asked Zara what she had observed about the children's relationship with each parent. She paused exactly long enough for the pause to register, and then said carefully, "The children love their father deeply. When he's not present, they ask for him." She folded her hands. She let that land. Then she said the thing she had practiced, saying and should never have said, "Children deserve a stable home with 2 parents who are fully present, not a single parent who is frequently elsewhere." She let it sit in the air. She was pleased with it. In the gallery, a woman pressed a hand to her mouth. 2 people exchanged a glance. The journalist in the back row underlined something twice. Nkechi Adeyemi wrote a single word on her legal pad and circled it 3 times. But it was Adaze's face that mattered most in that moment. Because for the first time since she had sat down in that courtroom, something shifted behind her eyes. Not fear, not grief, not even anger. Something older and quieter than all of those things. The expression of a mother who has been patient for a very long time and has just been given the clearest possible reminder of exactly why. Tobena was 9, Chisholm was 7. They were sitting with their grandmother 2 floors below this room. And a woman who barely knew their names had just used them as a legal instrument. Adaze's right hand moved slowly to the compass pendant at her chest. She held it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she let go, and she picked up her pen. Nkechi Adeyemi rose from her chair with the unhurried confidence of a woman who has been waiting for exactly this moment for 4 months and has absolutely no intention of rushing it now. She buttoned her jacket. She walked to the podium. She looked at Zara Esyan for 2 full seconds without speaking. Not as performance, not as intimidation, just focus. Then she smiled. Warm enough not to seem hostile. Specific enough to be a warning. 3 questions. The first, had Zara Esyan met the Okafor children in person? Zara said yes, twice. Nkechi wrote something. The second, had Zara ever attended any of the children's school events? medical appointments or activities? Zara said no, but added she hoped to. Nkechi wrote something without comment. Then the third question, the one that changed the room's temperature completely. Had Zara Essien ever conducted any financial transaction with Emeka Okafor that she had not disclosed to this court? 4 seconds of silence. In a courtroom, 4 seconds is an eternity. Zara said no. Her voice held. Her hands beneath the witness rail did not. Nkechi nodded once and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit C into evidence." She handed the document to the clerk and walked back to the defense table without looking at the witness stand again. She did not need to. She could already feel the temperature shift from across the room. Exhibit C was a 4-page corporate filing. It did not announce itself. It looked like paperwork, and paperwork was invented to hide very large things inside of. The clerk passed copies to the judge. Judge Bancole accepted them with the automatic courtesy of a man who receives documents all day. He glanced at the cover page. He began reading. And then, midway through the second paragraph, he stopped, not dramatically. His right hand, which had been moving toward page 3, went completely still. He read the same section again. A muscle in his jaw moved once. Then he removed his reading glasses, held them between 2 fingers, and looked at the defense table. Not at Nkechi, at Adaeze Okafor. He replaced his glasses and continued reading, but the quality of his attention had changed entirely. He had seen that name before. Not in a case file, not in this courtroom. He had seen it in a financial publication, in a business journal, in an industry ranking that lists people whose net worth is large enough to be considered news. He checked the case. File name. He read the document again. And then Judge Emmanuel Bancole, 29 years on the federal bench, a man who had seen everything, set the document down on his bench surface very carefully, as if it deserved to be handled with a certain amount of respect. Nkechi Adeyemi requested permission to submit 3 additional exhibits. Barrister Obi objected cleanly on procedural grounds. Judge Bancole overruled him without looking up from the document in his hands. This was unusual. Obi knew it was unusual. He leaned toward Emeka and said something brief. Emeka's face did not change, but his eyes moved to the defense table for the first time in 2 hours. Adaeze was not looking at him. She was writing in her notepad calmly the way a person writes in an office meeting, not a custody hearing, not a room where her marriage, her children, and 11 years of her life were currently in the hands of a judge who had just stopped moving when he read her name. The second document was a registered corporate ownership chart. The third was an independently audited financial summary. The fourth was a 10-year transaction history from the Federal Corporate Commission. Each document was clean, current, cross-referenced, time-stamped, signed by a registered auditor. Nkechi had assembled this file over 4 months quietly because Adaze had asked her to be quiet about it. Not because she was afraid, because she understood that the right moment for a reveal is never the first moment you know the truth. It is the last moment your opponent expects it. Nkechi turned to face the courtroom. No dramatic pause, no elevated voice, simply, "Your Honor, I direct the court's attention to the registered ownership structure of Okafor Essien Legal Holdings, documented in Exhibit D." And then the name was in the room. Okafor Essien Legal Holdings, $42 billion in managed assets and active litigation portfolios. 17 operational offices across Lagos, Abuja, Accra, Nairobi, Johannesburg, London, and Dubai. 843 full-time legal professionals. Corporate clients in 22 countries. The third largest private legal services firm on the African continent. Built over 14 years through inherited minority shareholding, 3 strategic acquisitions, and the kind of patient, sustained decision-making that most people mistake for luck when they don't understand who is making the decisions. And at the top of its ownership structure, sole majority shareholder, controlling 61.4% stake. The name that appeared in every audited report, every corporate filing, every regulatory submission for 14 consecutive years. Adaeze Okafor, not a corporation, not a holding vehicle. Her name, the woman at the defense table, the woman her husband had just told a federal judge under oath was financially dependent on him. 4 seconds of silence. Nothing moved except the ceiling fan turning without urgency above a room full of people who had just had their understanding of the last 2 hours completely reorganized. Then the gallery broke, not loudly, not with dramatic noise, but with the specific texture of people processing something that has changed what they thought they were watching. Low voices, a hand pressed to a mouth, 3 people turning to each other simultaneously. The journalists in the back row typing, one already on his phone. Emeka's attorney had stopped writing. His pen was on the table. He was looking at the exhibit documents with the focused attention of a man running calculations he does not want to run. Emeka himself had not moved. He sat in the exact posture he had maintained for the past 20 minutes, and yet something about him had changed, the way a building changes in the seconds before it fully settles. The confidence that had walked through that door at 9:04 a.m. had gone somewhere. The room had taken it. Zara Essien in the front gallery row had gripped the edge of the bench in front of her with both hands. She was looking at Adaze with an expression that had stopped being composed and was now simply staring. The face of a woman who has just realized that the game she thought she was playing was being played by someone else entirely on a board she could never see. And Adaze Okafor sat at the defense table with her hands folded and said nothing because she did not need to say anything. Yet, she rose from her chair the way people rise when they have been seated with complete intention and now stand with even more. There was nothing sudden about it, nothing performed. She placed both hands flat on the table surface for half a second before pushing herself upright, a gesture so small that only someone watching very closely would catch it. And it meant only one thing. She was ready. She buttoned the single button on her blazer. She adjusted the lapel once with her right hand. She did not look at Emeka. She did not look at Zara. She reached up briefly, instinctively, and touched the compass pendant at her collarbone. 1 second. Then she looked at Judge Bankole directly with the eye contact of a woman who has spent years in boardrooms, understanding that how you meet someone's gaze is itself a language. And she said in a voice that was measured and clear and reached every corner of that room without effort, "Your Honor, I would like to address the court." Nkichi beside her gave the slightest nod. Judge Bankole looked at Adaze over his reading glasses for a moment and said, "You may proceed, Ms. Okafor." The gallery went quiet instantly, because there was something about the way she was standing, not aggressive, not triumphant, nothing, performed, that communicated with complete clarity that what was about to happen was going to be worth hearing. The journalists stopped typing. The gallery leaned forward, and Emeka Okafor at the table across the room was suddenly very still in a way that was not the stillness of confidence. She spoke for 7 minutes and 14 seconds. She did not raise her voice once. She did not speak about the affair. She did not speak about betrayal or hurt or 11 years of a marriage that had slowly become something else. Those were personal things, and this was a courtroom, and she had understood long before today that the most powerful thing a person can do in a room designed for arguments is to give them fewer arguments than they expect and more facts than they can answer. She spoke about Okafor Essien legal holdings, how she had entered the firm's ownership structure 14 years ago as a minority stakeholder through her father's estate, and how over a decade she had reinvested, restructured, acquired 2 smaller firms, and built a controlling majority stake through transactions that were all documented, all audited, all filed correctly with every relevant regulatory body. She cited 3 independent audits by name. She referenced the most recent board meeting she had chaired, its date, its location, its agenda. She named 7 countries. She described the trust fund structures she had established for Tobena and Chisholm, already active, already funded, completely independent of anything Emeka Okafor had ever touched. She named her quarterly dividend distribution figure. One gallery spectator audibly exhaled. Then she said the line the entire room had been building toward without knowing it. "My husband has confused my quietness for absence, and he has confused my patience for permission." She let those words stand in the air for exactly 1 second. Then, "I would like the record to reflect that my children have never on any occasion been without their mother, and they are not going to start now." She sat down. She did not look at Emeka. She did not need to. Emeka Okafor was not a simple man. That was what made it complete to watch. He was intelligent, experienced, and had walked into this courtroom genuinely believing he had a full understanding of his own life. He had decided what his wife was in the second year of their marriage and had not revisited the decision since. He had looked at her every day for 11 years and seen exactly what he expected, because expectation is easier than observation, and Emeka had always been more comfortable with what he already believed than with what might require him to change. He sat at the plaintiff's table and listened to her speak. He heard her name 7 companies, cite 4 financial quarters, reference 2 regulatory bodies, describe a trust structure worth more than anything he had ever personally controlled. He heard the gallery react. He heard his attorney's pen go still on the table beside him. He heard with perfect clarity the phrase, "my patience for permission," and felt something inside his chest move in a way that had no precise name. Not shame exactly, not anger. The specific sensation of a man realizing he has spent 11 years standing next to something extraordinary and calling it ordinary because calling it ordinary was easier than paying attention. He did not cry. He did not speak. He stared at a point 6 inches above the surface of the table, and the expression on his face was the expression of a building being emptied, room by room, floor by floor, until nothing was left inside but the walls. Nkechi Adeyemi requested the court's attention to Exhibit G. 12 pages, obtained through a formal discovery request filed 4 months prior quietly without announcement, the same way Adaze did everything that mattered. Exhibit G documented 3 separate wire transfers originating from a shell-holding account connected directly to Emeka Okafor's personal financial portfolio, received by an account registered under Zara Essien's sole proprietorship, a consulting firm with no clients on record. The transfers had occurred over 18 months. The total, $472,000. During that same 18-month period, Zara Essien had signed 2 sworn affidavits submitted to this court stating explicitly that she had no financial relationship, compensation arrangement, or contractual agreement of any kind with the plaintiff. Emeka Okafor, 2 signed affidavits, now placed side by side with wire transfer records bearing dates, amounts, and routing numbers. The room did not need Nkechi to explain what that meant. They could read. Judge Bankole set the documents down. He folded his hands on the bench surface with the deliberateness of a man who has made a decision and will now communicate it precisely. He turned his gaze to the front row of the gallery and said quietly, "Ms. Essien, I would strongly recommend that you retain independent legal counsel before this session resumes, for yourself." In the front gallery row, Zara Essien sat completely still, both hands pressed flat against her thighs. The expression on her face was the expression of someone watching a door close that they had believed until 30 seconds ago was still open. Judge Emmanuel Bankole took 60 seconds before he spoke. He sat with both hands folded on the bench and reviewed the documents in front of him, not because he needed more time to decide, but because 30 years of judicial practice had taught him that the weight of a ruling should be felt before it is heard. A ruling delivered too quickly sounds reactive. A ruling that comes after 60 seconds of visible deliberation sounds like what it is: the conclusion of a mind that has seen everything and understood it. He spoke for 4 minutes. He noted for the record the material misrepresentations submitted to the court by the plaintiff regarding the respondent's financial status. He noted the false sworn statements submitted by a witness in connection with an undisclosed financial relationship. He noted that the foundational basis for the custody petition, the allegation of financial dependency, had been comprehensively and documentarily disproven by evidence now in the court's possession. Primary custody of Tobena and Chisom Okafor would remain without alteration with their mother, Adaeze Okafor. The application was dismissed. The matter of the false affidavits was referred for further legal review. He picked up his gavel and struck it once. The sound filled the room and stopped. And the case that Emeka Okafor had walked into that morning absolutely certain he would win was over. She found them on the 3rd floor landing near the tall windows overlooking the street. Tobena stood with his arms crossed, the way 9-year-old boys stand when they are trying to look older than they feel. His school shoes were scuffed on the left toe. He had his father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and right now the eyes were doing more of the work. Chisom was 7. And had not yet learned how to manage what her face did when she was afraid, so her face was doing exactly what it felt, which was everything at once. When the double doors opened and Adaze walked through them, Chisholm ran first, covered the distance between them at a dead sprint. Tabena waited exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked quickly, then quickly enough that it became running. He arrived at his mother's arms 2 seconds after his sister pressed his face into her shoulder and said nothing at all. Adaze dropped to one knee on the marble floor of that courthouse hallway and held both of them for a full, complete moment. She did not say everything was fine. She did not say nothing was wrong. She simply held them with the specific solidity of a mother who is done being afraid of losing something and is simply here now, holding it. Then Chisholm pulled back, put one small hand on her mother's face, and said the question that had been sitting in her chest since early that morning. "Were we going to lose you, Mama?" Adaze looked at her daughter's face without speaking. Not because she didn't know the answer, because some answers deserve the space to mean exactly what they mean before they are spoken. She took Chisholm's small hands in both of hers. She looked at her fully the way mothers look at their children when they need them to understand something that outlasts today, that outlasts this hallway, that outlasts everything that happened upstairs in Courtroom 7. "No," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Never." She looked at Tabena. He was watching her with his father's jaw set and his mother's eyes, and he nodded once slowly, the nod of someone for whom something has just been fully settled. Adaze held his gaze for 1 second, then rose from one knee in a single steady motion. She took both of her children's hands. She straightened her blazer once, automatically, the gesture of a woman who has been doing difficult things for a long time and knows how to find her posture on the other side of them. They walked toward the courthouse exit. Not quickly, not slowly, not performing anything for anyone who might be watching, just walking together steady the way they had always been, even when the world above them had been trying to argue otherwise. At the far end of the corridor, Emeka Okafor stood alone. His attorney had already left. He watched them go. He did not call out. There was nothing left to say. The corridor emptied. The sound of his children's footsteps faded, and he was standing in it by himself. Outside the city was the city. Traffic moved. Vendors called out. The afternoon light fell across everything without preference, across the courthouse steps and the parked cars and the people walking past who had no idea what had just happened on the 3rd floor of that building and would have kept moving even if they did. The world does not pause for individual reckonings. It continues indifferent and loud, while the most important moments of people's lives happen in rooms with polished floors and formal language. Adaze Okafor stood at the top of the courthouse steps for exactly 1 moment before her children pulled her down toward the car. She looked at the street and said nothing. She was not thinking about victory. She was not thinking about Emeka, or Zara, or the ruling, or the $42 billion. She was thinking about Chisholm's small hand on her face in that hallway. She was thinking about the question her daughter had asked, and the answer she had given, and how much she had meant it. She was also thinking about her father. About a back porch in Lagos, about an evening when the city had gone quiet, and a tall, unhurried man had reached into his shirt pocket and taken out a small compass and held it in his palm without explanation. She understood it now in a way she had not when she was young, in a way that grief had made possible. A compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you where you are, so you can never be lost. She reached up one last time and held the compass pendant between her fingers. Then she let go. She took both of her children's hands, and she went down the steps with them. A compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you where you are, so you can never be lost. Never confuse someone's silence with their surrender. Never confuse someone's gentleness with their limit. If this story moved something in you, you already know what to do. This channel exists for exactly this. Stories about the kind of strength that doesn't need a room full of people watching to be real. Stories about patience. About knowing exactly where you stand even when the room around you is trying to convince you otherwise. If that is what you came for, subscribe. We tell one story at a time. We make every word earn its place. And we will be here every week for anyone who needs to be reminded what quiet power actually looks like. Subscribe and stay close.